The airport buzzed with the usual Monday morning chaos. Business travelers clutched coffee cups, families corralled excited children, and airline staff navigated the crowd with practiced efficiency. Among them walked Lisa Chen, her wheeled carry-on trailing behind her as she checked her boarding pass one more time. Flight 372 to Chicago. Gate B14. Seat 23A. Window seat. Perfect. Lisa had specifically requested a window seat when booking her flight. After a week of non-stop client meetings that had left her mentally drained, all she wanted was to lean against the cool window, maybe catch a few hours of sleep, and arrive in Chicago ready for another round of presentations. As a marketing director for a mid-sized firm, these business trips were becoming more frequent, and she had developed a routine to make travel as painless as possible. Final boarding call for Flight 372 to Chicago, the announcement echoed through the terminal. Lisa quickened her pace, joining the short line of last-minute boarders. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a young woman with a bright smile who wished her a pleasant flight. "Thank you," Lisa replied, already looking forward to settling into her seat and tuning out the world for the next few hours. The narrow aisle of the Boeing 737 was cramped as usual. Lisa navigated past passengers struggling to fit oversized bags into the overhead bins, past a mother trying to calm a fussy toddler, past a flight attendant patiently answering questions. Finally, she reached row 23 and glanced at her boarding pass to confirm. Seat A, the window seat. But someone was already sitting there. A well-dressed black man in his 40s wearing a crisp navy suit and silver-framed reading glasses occupied her assigned window seat. His attention was focused on a stack of papers spread across the tray table before him, and he didn't look up as she stopped beside the row. Lisa cleared her throat. "Excuse me, I think you might be in my seat." The man looked up then, his expression calm and professional. He glanced at her boarding pass, then back at his own paperwork. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice deep and measured. "I'm in the correct seat. 3A. Lisa frowned, checking her boarding pass again. "That's strange. My pass also says 23A. She held it out for him to see. The man examined it briefly and shook his head. "There must be some mix-up at the counter. I specifically requested this seat when I booked my flight last month." He gestured to the empty middle seat beside him. "The middle seat appears to be free, though." Lisa felt a flare of annoyance. The middle seat was the last thing she wanted after her exhausting week. "Could I see your boarding pass, please?" The man hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and produced his boarding pass. Lisa leaned in to look. It did indeed read seat 23A. "This is odd," she said. "The airline must have double-booked the seat." She glanced around for a flight attendant, but they were all busy helping other passengers settle in. The boarding process was nearly complete, and the captain had just announced they would be pushing back from the gate in 5 minutes. "Look," the man said, gathering his papers into a neater pile. "I don't mean to be difficult, but I specifically need this window seat. It's—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "It's for a medical reason." Lisa raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "A medical reason? For a window seat?" The man's expression remained neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, I'd rather not discuss the details, but it is important." Several passengers had begun to notice their conversation. A middle-aged couple across the aisle were openly watching. Behind them, a young businessman was sighing dramatically, clearly annoyed at the delay in getting seated. "Is there a problem here?" A flight attendant named Diane finally approached, her professional smile doing little to hide her concern about the delay. "Yes," Lisa explained. "It seems this seat has been assigned to both of us." She handed over her boarding pass. Diane examined both their passes and frowned. "I'm very sorry about this. It appears there was an error in our system." She looked apologetically at Lisa. "Since both passes are valid and we're completely booked, would one of you be willing to take the middle seat? I can offer some extra miles for the inconvenience." Before Lisa could respond, the man spoke up. "I apologize, but as I was explaining to this lady, I need the window seat for medical reasons." Diane looked at him more carefully. A flash of recognition seemed to cross her face, though she quickly masked it. "I understand, sir. In that case," she turned to Lisa, "would the middle seat be acceptable? I'll make sure you receive 10,000 miles as compensation." Lisa felt cornered. Making a bigger scene would only delay the flight and embarrass her further. Already she could feel the judgment from nearby passengers who just wanted the boarding process to finish. "Fine," she said, trying to hide her frustration. "I'll take the middle seat." "Thank you for understanding," Diane said, seeming genuinely relieved. "I'll make sure those miles are credited to your account." The man shifted to allow Lisa access to the middle seat. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I appreciate your flexibility." Lisa didn't respond as she stowed her bag under the seat in front of her and buckled herself in. Her perfect travel plan was already ruined. No window to lean against for sleep. And now she was sandwiched between this mysterious man and whoever would take the aisle seat. As if on cue, a heavy-set older gentleman arrived, breathing heavily from his rush to the gate. 23C, he announced cheerfully. "That's me." Lisa forced a smile as he settled in beside her, immediately claiming both armrests. Perfect. The next 15 minutes passed in uncomfortable silence as the plane taxied and prepared for takeoff. Lisa pulled out her phone for one last check of emails before flight mode would be required. Beside her, the man in the window seat had returned to his paperwork, occasionally making notes in the margins with an expensive-looking fountain pen. Lisa couldn't help but glance at his documents. They appeared to be some sort of technical reports, with airline logos visible on several pages. Performance evaluations? Budget reports? She couldn't tell exactly, but they looked important. Her curiosity began to chip away at her annoyance. Who was this man? He was clearly someone of significance, judging by the flight attendant's reaction and the professional nature of his documents. Yet he wasn't flaunting his status or being rude about the seating situation. He had been firm, yes, but also polite. Electronic devices need to be stowed for takeoff. "Ma'am?" A different flight attendant reminded Lisa as he passed by their row. Lisa nodded and put her phone away, settling back into the uncomfortable middle seat as the engines roared and the plane began its acceleration down the runway. "Dear." Man beside her closed his folder of documents and carefully stored them in a leather portfolio bag at his feet. He then sat back, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath as the plane lifted off the ground. Lisa noticed his hands gripping the armrests tightly during the ascent. Was this the medical reason he needed a window seat? Some kind of flight anxiety that was easier to manage when he could see outside? But that didn't make sense. Most people with fear of flying avoided looking out the window during takeoff. Once they reached cruising altitude, the captain turned off the seatbelt sign and the flight attendants began preparing for beverage service. "First time flying to Chicago?" the man suddenly asked, turning slightly toward Lisa. Surprised by the casual question after their tense introduction, Lisa took a moment to respond. "No, I go there for work about once a month," he nodded. "Business traveler." "I thought as much." He extended his hand. "I'm Thomas, by the way." Lisa hesitated, then shook his hand. "Lisa." "I want to apologize again about the seating mix-up," Thomas said. "I know the middle seat isn't ideal for anyone." "It's fine," Lisa said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "These things happen." "You mentioned a medical reason?" Thomas adjusted his glasses. "Yes, it's not what most people would consider a traditional medical need, but—" He seemed to debate whether to continue. Lisa's curiosity got the better of her. "But?" "Let's just say I need to monitor certain aspects of the flight," he replied cryptically. "The window provides the necessary vantage point." Before Lisa could ask what that meant, the beverage cart reached their row. "Something to drink?" offered Diane, who had returned to her service duties. "Just water, please," Lisa said. Thomas smiled at Diane. "Coffee, black." "Thank you, Diane." Lisa noticed the flight attendant's slight nod of acknowledgement as if they knew each other. The formality in Diane's posture seemed different than with other passengers. As the flight continued, Lisa observed more unusual interactions. Other flight attendants would occasionally stop by their row, ostensibly to check if they needed anything, but Lisa caught whispered exchanges and meaningful glances between them and Thomas. Once, the lead flight attendant even brought him a folder that they discussed briefly before he tucked it away with his other documents. The pieces weren't quite fitting together in Lisa's mind. Thomas wasn't behaving like a typical passenger, yet he wasn't being treated with the overt deference usually reserved for celebrities or extremely wealthy individuals. There was something more professional about the dynamic. 40 minutes into the flight, when most passengers had settled into their books, movies, or naps, Thomas pulled out a small notebook and began making sketches while glancing occasionally out the window. Lisa couldn't help but notice he was drawing diagrams of the wing and engine, adding small annotations beside his drawings. "Are you an engineer?" she finally asked, her curiosity overcoming her lingering frustration about the seat. Thomas looked up from his notebook, seeming to consider his answer carefully. "In a manner of speaking," he replied with a small smile. "I have a background in aeronautical engineering, though my current role is more administrative." Lisa nodded, feeling there was more to the story but unsure if she should press further. The uncomfortable tension from earlier had faded, replaced by a strange sense that she was sitting next to someone important, someone with authority on this aircraft beyond that of a regular passenger. As they hit a patch of light turbulence, Thomas calmly reached up and pressed the call button. Within seconds, Diane appeared. "Yes, sir?" she asked, her tone professional but tinged with deference. "Please inform the captain that we're experiencing unnecessary turbulence. The weather report indicated we could avoid this by climbing to 37,000 feet. The current flight path takes us directly through the weather system." Diane nodded without hesitation. "I'll relay your message immediately, sir." Lisa stared at Thomas, her mind racing. Regular passengers didn't give instructions to the captain about flight paths and altitude changes, and flight attendants certainly didn't agree to relay such messages without question. Slowly, a realization began to form in Lisa's mind. This wasn't just any passenger beside her, and that window seat hadn't been randomly assigned. Sure enough, within minutes of Diane's departure, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're going to be adjusting our altitude to avoid some weather ahead. You may feel a slight ascent as we climb to a higher cruising level. We should have smoother air in just a few minutes. Thank you for your patience." Lisa stared at Thomas, who continued calmly sketching in his notebook as if nothing unusual had happened. The plane began to climb, and just as predicted, the bumpy ride soon smoothed out. "How did you?" Lisa began, then paused, unsure how to phrase her question without sounding accusatory. Thomas glanced up from his notebook. "How did I know about the weather system?" He smiled slightly. "Let's just say I reviewed the flight plan and weather charts before boarding." "And the captain just takes your advice like that?" Thomas closed his notebook and turned to face Lisa more directly. "I have some influence with this airline." "Are you some kind of aviation inspector?" Lisa asked, lowering her voice so nearby passengers wouldn't hear. Thomas chuckled softly. "Not exactly." He studied her for a moment, seeming to weigh his options. "I'm involved with airline operations at a high level. Today I'm on this flight for observation purposes." Before Lisa could press further, the heavy-set man in the aisle seat let out a rumbling snore. He had fallen asleep shortly after takeoff and showed no signs of waking anytime soon. "I think we've lost our roommate to dreamland," Thomas said with a hint of amusement in his voice. Lisa nodded, grateful for the small moment of levity. Despite her initial anger about the seating situation, she was finding it hard to stay annoyed with Thomas. There was something disarming about his calm confidence. The beverage cart made another round, and this time Diane brought Thomas's coffee without him even asking. "Just how you like it, sir," she said quietly. "Thank you, Diane," Thomas replied. "How are things in your department these days? Has that scheduling issue been resolved?" Diane's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Yes, sir. The new rotation system is working much better. The team appreciates the changes you implemented." Thomas nodded, looking pleased. "Good to hear. And your son? He was applying to flight school, if I remember correctly." Diane's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "He was accepted last month. I didn't realize you remembered that conversation." "Of course I did. It's not every day someone follows in their parents' footsteps in aviation. Tell him congratulations from me." Diane smiled warmly. "I will. Thank you, sir." She moved on with the cart, but not before giving Lisa a curious glance, as if wondering what she made of Thomas. Lisa waited until they were alone again. "You know the flight attendants personally?" "I know many of the staff," Thomas replied. "It's important in my position to understand the people who make this airline function." And what position is that exactly? Lisa asked directly. Thomas took a sip of his coffee, avoiding a direct answer once again. Tell me about your work, Lisa. You mentioned you travel to Chicago monthly? Lisa recognized the deflection, but decided to play along. I'm a marketing director for a tech company based in Chicago. We develop customer management software for small businesses. I visit our main office regularly, though I'm usually based on the West Coast. Interesting, Thomas said, seeming genuinely engaged. So you spend a lot of time flying for work? More than I'd like, Lisa admitted, though it comes with the territory. And how do you find the experience? With this airline specifically? Something about his tone made Lisa think carefully before answering. This wasn't just casual conversation. He was genuinely interested in her response. Overall, it's fine. This airline is better than most for domestic flights, she said honestly. The check-in process is usually smooth. Flights are mostly on time, though I wish the seats had a bit more legroom and the Wi-Fi can be spotty. Thomas nodded as if mentally taking notes. Anything else? Lisa thought for a moment. The mobile app could use some work. It crashes sometimes when I try to change my seat assignments. And the loyalty program isn't as competitive as some others. I stick with you guys mainly because of the direct flights to Chicago. All valid points, Thomas said, looking at her with new interest. You have a keen eye for user experience. That makes sense, given your marketing background. A sudden bump of turbulence interrupted their conversation. Thomas immediately looked out the window, studying the wing with practiced eyes. Nothing to worry about, he said calmly, almost to himself. Just a small air pocket. The turbulence passed quickly, but Lisa noticed that Thomas continued to observe the wing, occasionally making notes. His behavior was becoming more intriguing by the minute. You really do know a lot about planes, she observed. Thomas smiled. I've spent my entire career in aviation, started as a baggage handler in college, worked my way up through various positions. Along the way, I developed a deep appreciation for how these magnificent machines work. And now? Lisa prompted. Now I make sure they work as efficiently and safely as possible, he replied. A new flight attendant approached their row, a young man who appeared newer to the job than Diane. Excuse me, sir, he said to Thomas with obvious deference. The captain would like to know if you wish to visit the flight deck before we begin our descent into Chicago. Thomas checked his watch. Please tell Captain Reynolds I'll come up in 20 minutes. Yes, sir, the flight attendant replied before moving away. Lisa couldn't contain herself any longer. They're inviting you into the cockpit? During the flight? That's not allowed for regular passengers since 9/11. Thomas smiled enigmatically. I'm not exactly a regular passenger. Clearly, Lisa said, feeling a mixture of frustration and fascination. Look, I've been sitting next to you for almost 2 hours now. You've redirected our flight path. You know the staff by name, and now you're headed to the cockpit. Who are you? Thomas studied her for a long moment. I suppose there's no harm in telling you, though I generally prefer to remain anonymous during these flights. He extended his hand again. Thomas Wilson, Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Airlines. Lisa's jaw dropped. She instinctively shook his hand while her brain processed this revelation. You're the CEO of the entire airline? Thomas nodded, looking slightly amused at her reaction. For about 8 months now, yes. But why are you? Lisa gestured around them. Here, in economy class, taking notes on the wing? How else would I know what our customers experience? Thomas replied simply. I make a point of taking regular flights, in different cabin classes on various routes. I observe operations, talk to staff and passengers, see firsthand what works and what doesn't. And the window seat? Lisa asked, suddenly remembering how their interaction had begun. Ah, yes. Thomas looked slightly apologetic. I wasn't being entirely forthcoming about that. It's not a medical necessity in the traditional sense, but it is essential for my work. I need to observe wing performance, monitor engine operations, watch how the flight crew handles various situations. It's part of our ongoing safety protocols. Lisa's mind flashed back to her initial annoyance, her assumptions about Thomas and how she had nearly caused a scene. Heat rose to her cheeks. I had no idea. I'm sorry if I seemed difficult. Thomas waved away her apology. No need for that. You had every right to question the situation, and I couldn't exactly announce my position to the entire cabin. So that's why the flight attendants were acting so strangely around you, Lisa said, pieces falling into place. They all know who you are. Most of the senior crew recognize me, Thomas confirmed. Though I ask them to be discreet during these trips. I want authentic interactions, not special treatment. Lisa laughed softly. Well, having the captain change course for you is pretty special treatment. Thomas smiled. That was actually about safety and efficiency, not comfort. The route adjustment will save fuel and reduce wear on the aircraft, not to mention giving everyone a smoother ride. Lisa glanced at the sleeping passenger in their row. Clearly it worked for him. Indeed, Thomas said with a chuckle. The next 15 minutes passed quickly, as Thomas explained more about his role and his philosophy of hands-on leadership. Lisa found herself increasingly impressed by his approach. Here was the CEO of a major airline, flying economy, taking notes, and personally ensuring the company was operating at its best. I should head to the flight deck now, Thomas said, checking his watch again. It was a pleasure meeting you, Lisa. Thank you for the candid feedback about our services. Those kinds of honest observations are exactly why I take these flights. He gathered his notebook and pen, preparing to stand. Wait, Lisa said, suddenly remembering something. The seat assignment mix-up. Was that a mistake, or? Thomas paused, a slight smile playing at his lips. Let's just say I occasionally need to arrange things to ensure I get the specific seat I require for observation. He lowered his voice. The system rarely double-books seats accidentally. So you intentionally, Lisa began. I apologize for the inconvenience, Thomas said, looking genuinely contrite. If it helps, those 10,000 miles Diane promised will definitely be in your account. Plus, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. I'd like to offer you something else as well. Lisa took the card. It was heavy stock embossed with the airline logo and Thomas's name and title. On the back, he had handwritten a note. Upgrade to first class on your next flight. Call my office directly. That's really not necessary, Lisa began, but Thomas cut her off gently. I insist. Consider it an apology for the seat and a thank you for the marketing insights. He rose from his seat, careful not to disturb their still sleeping roommate. Besides, I think you'll find our first-class experience addresses several of the concerns you mentioned. As Thomas made his way toward the front of the plane, Lisa sat back in her middle seat, the business card still in her hand. The flight had taken an unexpected turn, to say the least. She watched as Thomas stopped briefly to chat with another flight attendant, his manner both professional and warm. The intercom chimed, and the captain's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Chicago. We're expecting clear conditions and should be arriving about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. Lisa smiled to herself. 10 minutes early? Somehow she suspected Thomas had something to do with that too. The sleeping man beside her finally stirred, blinking awake and yawning loudly. Did I miss anything? He asked, stretching as much as the confined space would allow. Lisa tucked the business card into her purse and smiled. Just the usual flight, she replied. Nothing out of the ordinary. The plane touched down in Chicago right on schedule, actually 10 minutes early, just as the captain had announced. Lisa gathered her belongings, her mind still processing the unexpected turn her flight had taken. Thomas hadn't returned to his seat after visiting the cockpit, which wasn't surprising. As the CEO, he likely had other matters to attend to before landing. As passengers began the usual shuffle toward the exits, Diane approached Lisa's row. Ms. Chen, she said with a warm smile, Mr. Wilson asked me to escort you once we've landed. If you don't mind waiting until the other passengers have deplaned. The man in the aisle seat gave Lisa a curious glance as he squeezed past, clearly wondering why she was receiving special treatment. Sure, Lisa replied, uncertain what this meant but intrigued enough to agree. Once the cabin had emptied, Diane gestured for Lisa to follow her. Instead of heading toward the regular exit at the front of the plane, they moved toward a door that connected directly to the jet bridge through the first-class section. Mr. Wilson is waiting in the terminal, Diane explained. He thought you might appreciate avoiding the crowd. Lisa followed, feeling oddly like a VIP despite having spent the flight crammed into a middle seat in economy. As they stepped into the terminal, Thomas was indeed waiting, now wearing a light overcoat and carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He was speaking with a woman in a Horizon Airlines uniform, who appeared to be a high-ranking staff member, based on her attire and the respectful way she was taking notes on a tablet. Upon seeing Lisa, Thomas concluded his conversation with a nod and approached her with an extended hand. "Lisa, thank you for waiting. I hope you don't mind this slight detour." "Not at all," she replied, shaking his hand, "though I'm not sure why." "I had an idea during our conversation," Thomas explained. "You mentioned you're a marketing director specializing in customer experience, and you provided some very insightful observations about our airline services." Lisa nodded, recalling their mid-flight discussion. "I have a proposition for you," Thomas continued. "Horizon is currently revamping our customer experience strategy. We're looking for fresh perspectives, particularly from frequent business travelers like yourself who understand the pain points of regular flying." Lisa's professional interest was immediately piqued. "What kind of proposition?" "A consulting opportunity," Thomas said. "Initially just a focus group and some feedback sessions, but potentially more if there's a good fit." "Would your company allow you to take on a side project?" Lisa blinked in surprise. "I think so, as long as it's not with a competitor. We don't work with airlines." "Excellent. My assistant is preparing a formal invitation with the details," Thomas said, nodding toward the woman he'd been speaking with, who was now on the phone a short distance away. "But I wanted to ask you personally first." Lisa couldn't help but feel flattered and slightly bewildered by this turn of events. "All this because I complained about your mobile app and Wi-Fi?" Thomas laughed, a genuine warm sound that made several nearby travelers glance their way. "Partly, but mostly because you gave honest, constructive feedback even when you didn't know who I was. That's valuable. Too many people tell me what they think I want to hear." Before Lisa could respond, a breathless young man in an airline uniform hurried up to them, a look of mild panic on his face. "Mr. Wilson, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation at gate C-22. The Chicago-Atlanta flight is experiencing a mechanical delay and there are some heated passengers. Operations thought you might want to be aware since you're on site." Thomas's expression shifted instantly from casual to focused. "How long is the delay?" "At least 3 hours, sir. Possibly overnight if they can't resolve the issue." Thomas turned to Lisa apologetically. "Duty calls, I'm afraid. Would you excuse me for a moment?" "Of course," Lisa said, finding herself unexpectedly caught up in the behind-the-scenes drama of airline operations. "Please wait here if you can," Thomas said. "I'd like to continue our conversation." Then to Diane, who was still standing nearby, "Would you make sure Ms. Chen has everything she needs? Perhaps some coffee?" "Right away, sir," Diane replied. With that, Thomas strode away, following the young staff member toward what was clearly developing into a crisis situation. Lisa watched him go, struck by how quickly he had switched into problem-solving mode. "He's always like that," Diane commented, noticing Lisa's expression, running toward fires instead of away from them. Lisa accepted the coffee Diane brought a few minutes later and settled into a seat in the waiting area. She pulled out her phone to check emails but found herself more interested in observing the airport around her. After her conversation with Thomas, she was seeing everything through new eyes, not just as a passenger, but as someone considering the entire customer journey. Nearly 40 minutes passed before Thomas returned, looking slightly weary but satisfied. "Crisis averted?" Lisa asked as he approached. "Managed, at least," Thomas replied, taking the seat beside her. "We're flying in a replacement part from our maintenance hub and providing meal vouchers and hotel arrangements for those who'll be significantly delayed." "And did that calm the heated passengers?" Thomas smiled wryly. "Mostly, though I suspect a few strongly worded complaints will still find their way to my inbox." He checked his watch. "I've taken up enough of your time. You probably have meetings to get to." "Actually, my first meeting isn't until tomorrow morning," Lisa admitted. "I always come in a day early to adjust and prepare." "Smart practice," Thomas nodded approvingly. "In that case, would you join me for an early dinner? We can discuss the consulting opportunity in more detail, and I'd appreciate your feedback on some other customer experience initiatives we're considering." Lisa hesitated only briefly. This was certainly unusual. A few hours ago, she'd been angry at a stranger who wouldn't give up her seat. Now that same stranger, who turned out to be the CEO of a major airline, was inviting her to dinner to discuss a business opportunity. I'd like that, she decided, though I should probably check into my hotel and freshen up first. Of course, Thomas agreed. Where are you staying? The Palmer House downtown. Perfect. I can have a car pick you up at 6 if that works for you. There's a restaurant not far from there with some privacy where we can talk. They exchanged phone numbers and Thomas arranged for a car service to take Lisa to her hotel. As they parted ways at the terminal exit, Lisa still felt like she was in some kind of dream. Had this really happened? Had a seating dispute actually turned into a potential consulting gig? At her hotel, after a refreshing shower and change of clothes, Lisa did a quick internet search for Thomas Wilson Horizon Airlines. Sure enough, dozens of results appeared, including press releases about his appointment as CEO 8 months earlier, interviews about his vision for the company, and photos from industry events. One article particularly caught her attention. New Horizon CEO takes hands-on approach, flies regularly as mystery passenger to assess services. The article explained Thomas's unusual management style, how he regularly flew on his own airline incognito, experiencing the service as an ordinary passenger would. His approach had reportedly boosted employee morale and led to several practical improvements in customer service. The piece included quotes from industry analysts who were skeptical at first but now praised the results his methods had achieved. Lisa sat back on the hotel bed, feeling a new respect for the man she'd initially been so annoyed with. His commitment to understanding the customer experience firsthand was something she could appreciate as a marketing professional. At precisely 6 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a text message. Your car is waiting in front of the hotel. Thomas Wilson. Downstairs, a sleek black town car was indeed waiting. The driver, a professional-looking woman in a sharp suit, opened the door for her. Good evening, Ms. Chen. I'll be taking you to Riverfront, at Mr. Wilson's request. Riverfront was one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, known for its spectacular views of the Chicago River and its private dining rooms where business executives could discuss sensitive matters away from prying ears and eyes. As the car navigated through Chicago's early evening traffic, Lisa found herself wondering where this unexpected detour in her routine business trip might lead. The consulting opportunity sounded intriguing, but there was something more happening here, a connection, a mutual respect that had formed in the most unlikely of circumstances. The car pulled up to the restaurant, where Thomas was waiting at the entrance. He had changed as well, now wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked custom-tailored to his athletic frame. Right on time, he said with a warm smile, extending his hand to help her from the car. I hope you like river views. Love them, Lisa replied, returning his smile. As they entered the restaurant, they were immediately greeted by the manager, who clearly recognized Thomas and led them to a private dining area overlooking the water. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a stunning panorama of the city as the evening lights began to twinkle on. This is breathtaking, Lisa commented as they were seated. One of my favorite spots in Chicago, Thomas agreed. I discovered it years ago when I was just a regional manager attending a conference. I promised myself I'd come back when I had something to celebrate. And what are we celebrating tonight? Lisa asked, curious. Thomas smiled as he unfolded his napkin. New beginnings, unexpected opportunities, and the fact that sometimes the most interesting business connections start with a disagreement over a window seat. Lisa couldn't help but laugh. I have to admit, when I boarded that plane this morning, I never imagined I'd end the day having dinner with the CEO. And I never imagined I'd find a potential consultant for our customer experience initiative, Thomas countered. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes, doesn't it? As they settled in to review the menu, Lisa had a feeling this dinner would be just the beginning of a very interesting new chapter for both of them. Dinner with Thomas proved to be as enlightening as it was enjoyable. Over exquisitely prepared meals, they discussed everything from airline operations to marketing strategies, from customer psychology to digital user experience. Lisa found herself impressed not just with Thomas's knowledge of the industry, but with his genuine passion for improving every aspect of his company. The way I see it, Thomas said as they shared a dessert of caramelized apple tart. An airline isn't just selling transportation from point A to point B. We're selling an experience, one that should be as seamless and pleasant as possible, from the moment a customer books their ticket to the moment they collect their luggage at their destination. Lisa nodded. That's actually very similar to what I tell my tech clients. Software isn't just about functionality, it's about the entire user journey. Exactly, Thomas said, looking pleased. And that's why your perspective would be so valuable to us. You understand both sides, the business needs and the customer experience. By the time they finished their coffee, Thomas had outlined a 3-month consulting project that would involve Lisa attending executive meetings, conducting focus groups with frequent flyers, and developing recommendations for improving Horizon Airlines' customer experience strategy. The compensation would be competitive, of course, Thomas added, and all work could be done either remotely or during your regular trips to Chicago, so it wouldn't interfere with your primary job. It sounds intriguing, Lisa admitted. I'd need to check with my boss, but I think he'd see the value in it, especially since we're always looking to expand our network. Take your time, Thomas said, sliding a folder across the table. All the details are in here. My direct number is included if you have any questions. As they prepared to leave, Thomas received a call that he apologetically had to take. Lisa stepped away to give him privacy, wandering over to the restaurant's large windows to admire the nighttime view of Chicago. The river reflected the city lights like a dark mirror, boats gliding silently beneath bridges that connected the various parts of the downtown area. She found herself reflecting on the strange turn of events that had brought her here. If someone had told her this morning that she'd end her day dining with the CEO of Horizon Airlines and considering a consulting opportunity with them, she'd have laughed it off as ridiculous. Yet here she was. Thomas joined her at the window a few minutes later. Sorry about that. We have a situation with a connecting flight in Dallas that needed immediate attention. No problem, Lisa assured him. The life of a CEO seems to involve a lot of putting out fires. Thomas smiled wryly. Some days more than others. Though I have to admit today has been a pleasant exception, despite the minor crises. His expression grew more serious. I wanted to ask you something, Lisa. Something that's been on my mind since our flight. What's that? When you first approached me about the seat, did you hesitate because of who I am? Because I'm a black man? The directness of the question caught Lisa off guard. She took a moment to consider her answer. I hesitated because you were in my seat, she said finally, meeting his gaze. If anything, I was more assertive because you were well-dressed and seemed important. I thought you might be trying to use status to take advantage. Thomas nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty. It's something I've dealt with throughout my career, especially as I've moved up the corporate ladder. People see a black man in a position of power and make assumptions, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but assumptions nonetheless. I can imagine it's exhausting, Lisa said quietly. It can be, Thomas acknowledged, which is partly why I value these anonymous flights. When passengers don't know I'm the CEO, I get to experience how our staff and services truly operate. No special treatment, no facades, except for commandeering window seats, Lisa added with a small smile. Thomas laughed. Fair point. I suppose I bend the rules occasionally in service of the greater good. A comfortable silence fell between them as they both gazed out at the city lights. My car can take you back to your hotel, Thomas offered after a moment. And if you decide the consulting opportunity interests you, just call the number in the folder. Lisa nodded. Thank you for dinner, and for turning what could have been an unpleasant flight into whatever this is. An unexpected connection, Thomas suggested. Sometimes the most valuable relationships start in the most unlikely ways. The drive back to her hotel gave Lisa time to process the evening. The consulting offer was professionally exciting, but she also found herself drawn to Thomas as a person. His leadership style, his commitment to excellence, and his willingness to acknowledge the complicated realities of being a black executive in an industry not known for its diversity. Back in her room, Lisa opened the folder Thomas had given her. Inside was a formal offer letter outlining the consulting arrangement, along with a confidentiality agreement and a surprisingly generous compensation proposal. Also included was a small sealed envelope with her name handwritten on the front. Curious, Lisa opened it to find a handwritten note. Lisa, beyond the professional opportunity, I wanted to thank you personally for today's conversation. It's rare to find someone who speaks their mind so clearly and thoughtfully, especially to a stranger who refused to give up their seat. Your insights about our services were more valuable than weeks of formal customer surveys. Whether or not you accept the consulting position, I hope our paths cross again. Regards, Thomas. Lisa read the note twice, touched by the personal gesture. There was something refreshingly genuine about Thomas that defied the typical corporate executive stereotype. She set her alarm for early the next morning, planning to call her boss before her meetings to discuss the consulting opportunity. Then she drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with airplanes and unexpected journeys. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Lisa's company enthusiastically approved her taking on the consulting role with Horizon Airlines, seeing it as both a professional development opportunity for her and a chance to establish a relationship with a major corporation. She coordinated with Thomas's executive assistant to schedule her first official visit to Horizon's headquarters, which would coincide with her next planned trip to Chicago. In the meantime, she found herself paying much closer attention to her flight experiences, noticing details about boarding procedures, seat comfort, crew interactions, and dozens of other small elements that most passengers overlooked. She began keeping notes, building a framework for the recommendations she would eventually present to Horizon's executive team. When the day finally came for her return flight to Chicago, Lisa felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This trip would be different. She wasn't just a marketing director heading to routine meetings. She was now also a consultant for the airline itself, with direct access to its CEO. As she checked in for her flight, the agent at the counter did a double-take when looking at her reservation. "Ms. Chen, I see you've been upgraded to first class," the agent said, a note of surprise in her voice. "And there's a note here that you're to be given access to our premium lounge before boarding." Lisa hadn't expected this. "Oh, that's not necessary. I'm fine with my regular seat." The agent shook her head. "I'm sorry, but these instructions come directly from the executive office. The system won't let me override them." With a mix of amusement and slight embarrassment, Lisa accepted the new boarding pass. This must be Thomas's doing, though she hadn't spoken directly with him since their dinner. All communication had been through his highly efficient assistant, a woman named Patricia, who managed his calendar with military precision. The premium lounge was a revelation: quiet spaces for working, comfortable seating, complimentary food and beverages, and attentive staff who seemed genuinely pleased to help. Lisa found a secluded corner with a good view of the tarmac and set up her laptop, intending to review some materials before boarding. She'd been working for about 20 minutes when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she was startled to see Thomas standing there, carry-on bag in hand and a warm smile on his face. "I thought I might find you here," he said. "Patricia mentioned you were on today's flight." Lisa stood to greet him, suddenly conscious of her casual travel outfit compared to his impeccable suit. "I wasn't expecting the upgrade," she said. "Though I have to admit the lounge is a nice perk." "Consider it research," Thomas replied with a wink. "How can you evaluate our premium services if you haven't experienced them?" They spent the next half hour chatting about the upcoming project, with Thomas sharing insights about the airline's current challenges and Lisa outlining her preliminary thoughts on areas for improvement. "I'm impressed," Thomas said as the announcement came for their flight's boarding. "You've clearly been thinking about this deeply." "It's an interesting challenge," Lisa admitted, "and I find myself noticing things about air travel that I used to ignore completely." They walked together to the gate, drawing curious glances from both staff and other passengers who recognized Thomas. "Will you be sitting in your usual observation seat today?" Lisa asked with a small smile as they waited to board. Thomas laughed. "Not today. I think I've caused you enough seating inconvenience for 1 month." He glanced at his boarding pass. "I'm in 2A, first class window." "And I'm in 2B, Lisa realized, looking at her own pass. "First class aisle." "Pure coincidence," Thomas said, though his eyes twinkled in a way that suggested otherwise, "though it will give us a chance to continue our conversation." As they settled into their spacious first-class seats, Lisa couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically things had changed since their first meeting. From a dispute over a seat to colleagues sitting side by side, planning improvements that would affect thousands of passengers. "Penny for your thoughts?" Thomas asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Lisa smiled. I was just thinking about how unpredictable life can be. 3 weeks ago, I was annoyed at a stranger for taking my window seat. Now here we are? Here we are indeed, Thomas agreed. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning. As the plane began its taxi to the runway, Lisa couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the journey truly was more important than the destination, and this particular journey was proving to be more interesting than she could have possibly imagined. 6 months had passed since that fateful flight where Lisa had confronted Thomas about her window seat. 6 months of regular trips to Chicago, executive meetings, focus groups, and countless hours analyzing customer feedback data. What had begun as a 3-month consulting project had extended twice, as Horizon Airlines implemented Lisa's recommendations with remarkable success. Today was different, though. Today was the official unveiling of Horizon's completely revamped customer experience program, a comprehensive overhaul that touched everything from their website and mobile app to their check-in procedures, in-flight services, and loyalty program, and Lisa had been invited to attend the press conference as a special guest. She stood off to the side of the conference room at Horizon's headquarters, watching as journalists and industry analysts filled the seats. A stage had been set up at the front, with the company's logo prominently displayed on the wall behind a podium. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Rumors of Horizon's transformation had been circulating in the industry for months. Nervous? A familiar voice asked from beside her. Lisa turned to see Thomas looking sharp in a navy suit tailored to perfection. Despite the frequency of their meetings over the past months, she still sometimes found herself surprised by his commanding presence. A little, she admitted. I'm not used to being in the spotlight. You deserve to be, Thomas said firmly. This program wouldn't exist without you. Lisa shook her head. That's an exaggeration. You were already heading in this direction. I just helped organize and prioritize the changes. You're being modest, Thomas replied. Your fresh perspective and methodical approach transformed what would have been minor tweaks into a comprehensive reinvention. He checked his watch. It's almost time. Ready to see the results of all your hard work? Before she could answer, Patricia, Thomas's assistant, approached them with an urgent expression. Mr. Wilson, we have a situation. The video production team says there's a technical issue with the presentation. They need at least 15 minutes to fix it. Thomas remained calm. Tell the team they have 10 minutes. We'll start with my remarks and the formal announcement. Have someone let the press know we're beginning in 5 minutes. Patricia nodded and hurried off, her phone already at her ear. Always something, Thomas said with a resigned smile. The life of a CEO is just one fire drill after another. Lisa had witnessed this side of Thomas many times now, the unflappable leader who solved problems without drama or panic. It was one of the qualities she'd come to admire most about him. I should find my seat, Lisa said, noticing that the room was nearly full. Actually, Thomas replied, I was hoping you'd join me on stage for the announcement. Lisa blinked in surprise. Me, why? Because you're a key part of this story, Thomas explained. A chance encounter that led to meaningful change. Plus, I think our passengers would appreciate knowing that their experience was shaped by someone who understands their perspective. Before Lisa could protest, the lights dimmed slightly and Patricia appeared at Thomas's side. They're ready for you, sir. Thomas offered Lisa his arm. Shall we? With a mixture of nervousness and excitement, Lisa walked with him toward the stage. This wasn't what she had expected when she arrived this morning, but then again, nothing about her relationship with Thomas or Horizon Airlines had followed the expected path. The room quieted as Thomas took the podium, with Lisa standing slightly to the side. Camera flashes popped from the press section as photographers captured images of the airline's CEO and his mysterious companion. Good morning, everyone, Thomas began, his voice confident and warm. Thank you for joining us today for what I believe is an important moment in Horizon Airlines' history. For over 30 years, our company has prided itself on safety, reliability, and service. But in recent months, we've undertaken a journey to redefine what service truly means in modern air travel. He went on to outline the challenges facing airlines today: increasing competition, rising customer expectations, and the need to balance efficiency with personalization. Lisa watched him with admiration, noting how skillfully he connected with his audience. This journey of transformation began, believe it or not, with a dispute over a window seat. Thomas continued, glancing at Lisa with a smile. 6 months ago, I was conducting one of my regular, incognito flights to assess our service when I encountered a passenger who wasn't afraid to speak her mind about our shortcomings. Ripple of interested murmurs passed through the crowd. That passenger turned out to be Lisa Chen, a marketing director specializing in customer experience. Thomas gestured toward Lisa. What started as a disagreement over seating became one of the most valuable consulting relationships in our company's history. Lisa felt her cheeks warm as the attention of the room shifted to her. She hadn't expected to be highlighted this way. I'd like to invite Lisa to tell you a bit about the changes we're announcing today, Thomas said, stepping back from the podium and motioning for her to take his place. Taking a deep breath, Lisa moved forward. Public speaking had never been her favorite activity, but the months of presenting to Horizon's executive team had helped her confidence. She looked out at the sea of attentive faces and began to speak. Thank you, Thomas. When I boarded that flight 6 months ago, I was just a tired business traveler annoyed about losing my window seat. This drew a gentle laugh from the audience. I had no idea that the person I was confronting was the CEO, or that the conversation would lead to a complete reimagining of how an airline connects with its passengers. With growing confidence, Lisa outlined the key elements of the new program. A redesigned mobile app that actually worked when changing seats. A revamped loyalty program that rewarded not just miles flown, but customer loyalty across multiple touchpoints. Streamlined check-in procedures that reduced wait times by 40%, and innovative in-flight services tailored to different traveler needs. But the most important change, she concluded, isn't any specific feature or program. It's the shift in perspective, from seeing passengers as tickets and seat numbers to understanding them as individuals with unique needs and preferences. It's about making every traveler feel valued, from the moment they book until they reach their destination. The presentation continued with video, demonstrations of the new app and testimonials from passengers who had experienced the pilot program on select routes. Throughout it all, Thomas remained close by, occasionally adding context or answering technical questions from the press. When the formal presentation ended, they moved to a reception area where journalists approached with follow-up questions. Lisa found herself surrounded by industry reporters eager to hear more about her unusual journey from disgruntled passenger to key consultant. So, you really had no idea he was the CEO when you confronted him? One reporter asked. None whatsoever, Lisa confirmed with a laugh. I just thought he was someone who wouldn't give up my seat. And Mr. Wilson, another reporter turned to Thomas. What made you decide to hire someone who essentially called you out? Thomas smiled. The best insights often come from the most honest feedback. Lisa wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply sharing her genuine experience as a customer. That's invaluable. As the reception continued, Lisa found a quiet moment to slip away to the refreshment table. She was pouring herself a much-needed glass of water when Thomas joined her. You were brilliant, he said. The press is eating this up. CEO hires his critic makes for a compelling headline. I still can't believe you put me on the spot like that, Lisa replied, though without any real annoyance. A little warning would have been nice. Where's the fun in that? Thomas teased. Besides, no one could tell your story better than you. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the buzzing crowd from their quiet corner. Over the months of working together, their professional relationship had deepened into a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared goals. I've been meaning to ask, Thomas said after a moment. Your contract extension ends next week. Have you given any thought to what comes next? Lisa had indeed been thinking about it. Quite a lot, in fact. The consulting work with Horizon had been some of the most satisfying of her career. I have, actually. My company has been dropping hints about a promotion. Vice President of Customer Experience. That's fantastic, Thomas said, though Lisa thought she detected a note of disappointment in his voice. They recognize your talent. You'd be excellent in that role. I would, Lisa agreed, but I've been considering another option as well. She turned to face him directly. Horizon doesn't have a chief customer officer, does it? Thomas's eyebrows rose. We don't, though it's a position I've been considering creating for some time. What a coincidence, Lisa said with a smile. Because I happen to know someone who might be perfect for the role. Someone who understands both the business and customer sides, who's already proven she can implement successful initiatives, and who isn't afraid to tell the CEO when he's wrong. A slow smile spread across Thomas's face. Is that so? And would this qualified candidate be interested in a formal interview? I think she might be, Lisa replied, though she'd want to make sure the CEO understands she'll need a window seat on all company flights. Thomas laughed, a rich, warm sound that drew glances from nearby attendees. I think that could be arranged. His expression grew more serious. In all honesty, Lisa, you'd be an incredible addition to our executive team. The work you've done as a consultant has already transformed our company. I'd want to finish what we've started, Lisa said. This program has so much potential, and I've become invested in seeing it succeed. Then let's talk seriously about it next week, Thomas suggested. After the media buzz dies down, as they rejoined the reception, fielding more questions from journalists and accepting congratulations from Horizon executives, Lisa found herself reflecting on the strange and wonderful journey that had led her here. One small confrontation, one moment of standing her ground, had opened a door to unexpected opportunities and connections. Life's most meaningful journeys, she realized, often began with the smallest of steps, or in her case, with the simple act of asking for her rightful seat on an ordinary flight that turned out to be anything but ordinary.